Hey everyone! Before we start the video, I just wanted to clarify something important. Recently, my channel faced a major issue where YouTube completely disabled monetization. As a result, I'll be significantly reducing the number of videos I upload, along with making some changes to the backgrounds and overall style of the videos. Despite these challenges, I'm committed to continuing to create quality content for you, and I truly appreciate your ongoing support. Thanks for understanding, and now, let's get into the video. The laughter around the dinner table stopped the moment I pulled out my phone. Sarah's new girlfriend, the one who'd been mocking me for the past 20 minutes, suddenly went very quiet. My father-in-law, who'd just told me to stop making his family look bad, was staring at my screen with his mouth open. My wife Jessica's hand froze halfway to her wine glass. And Brandon, my brother-in-law, who'd been encouraging his girlfriend's attacks all evening, looked like he'd just swallowed something rotten. My name is Tyler Morrison. I'm 36 years old, and until that Sunday dinner at my in-laws' house, I thought I'd married into a decent family. I'd been with Jessica for 8 years, married for 5, and I'd spent those years bending over backward to fit into the Patterson family dynamic. They were old money, Connecticut blue bloods who never let you forget they came from something better than wherever you crawled out of. I came from a working-class neighborhood in Hartford where my dad drove trucks and my mom worked as a cashier at Stop and Shop. But I'd built something. Started my own logistics consulting firm at 28, grew it into a multi-million-dollar operation by 32, and now employed 47 people across 3 offices. The Pattersons knew this, but they never acknowledged it. To them, I was still the kid from the wrong side of town who got lucky. The dinner started normally enough. Jessica and I arrived at her parents' house in Westport at 6 o'clock, just like we did every other Sunday. The place was a sprawling colonial that looked like it belonged in a magazine spread. Her father, Richard Patterson, owned a chain of car dealerships across Connecticut. Her mother, Victoria, spent her days volunteering for charity boards and planning fundraising galas. Brandon, Jessica's younger brother, was already there when we arrived. He was 29, worked in sales at one of his father's dealerships, and had a new girlfriend every few months. This time, he'd brought Sarah Kingsley, a 26-year-old who worked in marketing, according to the introduction Victoria gave when we walked into the dining room. Sarah was attractive in that polished way some women spend hours achieving. Perfectly straightened blonde hair, designer dress that probably costs more than most people's monthly rent, and the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no in your entire life. "Tyler," Victoria said as we took our seats. "Sarah works for Ashton and Pierce. You know, the marketing firm downtown." I nodded politely. "Nice to meet you, Sarah." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You too. Brandon's told me so much about his family." The first 20 minutes of dinner passed with the usual Patterson family conversation. Richard talked about sales numbers at the dealerships. Victoria discussed the upcoming charity auction she was organizing. Brandon bragged about some big sale he'd made that week. Jessica talked about her work as an interior designer. Nobody asked me about my business. That was normal. The Pattersons had a way of making you feel like you weren't quite worth their attention unless you were serving them in some way. Then Sarah started. "So Tyler," she said, cutting into her salmon with precise movements, "Jessica mentioned you run some kind of consulting business?" "I do," I said. "Logistics consulting. We help companies optimize their supply chains and distribution networks." She nodded slowly, like I just told her I collected bottle caps for a living. "That sounds interesting. So, like, you tell truck drivers where to go?" Brandon laughed. Jessica shot me an apologetic look, but didn't say anything. "Not exactly," I said evenly. "We analyze entire logistical operations and develop strategies to reduce costs and improve efficiency. It's fairly complex work involving data analysis, network modeling, and strategic planning." Sarah took a sip of her wine, smirking slightly. Right. My mistake. "So, you're like a middle manager? But for trucks." Richard chuckled. Victoria smiled behind her wine glass. Jessica was studying her plate like it contained the secrets of the universe. I felt the familiar tightness in my chest that always came when the Pattersons decided to remind me I wasn't really one of them. But I'd learned over 8 years to just take it. Fighting back never worked. It just made things worse. "Something like that," I said quietly. And that was my mistake. The moment I backed down, Sarah sensed weakness. If you're enjoying this story and want to hear more about standing up for yourself and handling family dynamics, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment below sharing your own experiences with difficult in-laws, and hit that like button so more people can find these stories. Your support really helps the channel grow. Brandon tells me you grew up in Hartford, Sarah continued, and there was something predatory in her tone now. That must have been tough. I mean, I've driven through there a few times. Not exactly the nicest area. It wasn't bad, I said. Good people, strong community. Oh, I'm sure, Sarah said with false sympathy. Everyone's doing their best with what they have, right? I mean, not everyone can afford private schools and summer homes in the Hamptons. That's what makes America great, you know? People from all backgrounds can succeed. The table went quiet. Even Brandon looked slightly uncomfortable, though he was still smiling. Tyler's done very well for himself, Jessica finally spoke up, her voice small. Oh, absolutely, Sarah agreed enthusiastically. I mean, to go from that kind of background to running your own little business, that's the American dream right there. Very impressive. Little business. The words hung in the air like smoke. I looked around the table. Richard was concentrating very hard on his food. Victoria was refilling her wine glass. Brandon was trying not to laugh. And Jessica was sitting, there, silent, letting this stranger insult her husband in her parents' home. We should probably talk about something else, I said quietly. Why? Sarah asked with false innocence. I think it's fascinating. I love hearing success stories from people who've overcome adversity. It's so inspiring. She wasn't even being subtle about it anymore. Every word was calculated to remind me that I wasn't good enough, that I didn't belong, that I was lucky to be sitting at this table with these people who were so much better than me. Sarah's right, Brandon said, finally joining in. Tyler's come a long way. Remember when we first met him, Dad? He was driving that old Honda with the dent in the door. Richard smiled. I do remember that. What year was that car, Tyler? 95, 96? 97, I said. Still running? Sarah asked sweetly. I sold it years ago. Oh, that's good. I mean, once you start making real money, you can afford to upgrade these things. Real money. Like the 7-figure income I'd pulled in last year wasn't real enough. Victoria decided to join the fun. Tyler's always been very practical about money, very careful with spending. I suppose that comes from growing up without much. I felt my jaw tighten. 8 years of this. 8 years of subtle digs and backhanded compliments and being made to feel like I should be grateful they let me marry their daughter. You know what I find so admirable? Sarah continued, and I knew whatever came next would be worse. People who work with their hands, real blue-collar work. Like your father was a truck driver, right, Tyler? He is a truck driver, I corrected. He's not dead. Right, sorry, is a truck driver. That's such honest work. My father always says we need people willing to do those jobs. Somebody has to, right? Brandon was openly laughing now. Jessica had tears in her eyes, but she still wasn't saying anything. Richard and Victoria were watching the show like it was entertainment at dinner theater. Sarah, I said, keeping my voice level, I think you're being disrespectful. Disrespectful? She looked genuinely shocked. I'm complimenting you. I'm saying I admire people who come from nothing and make something of themselves. How is that disrespectful? Richard finally spoke up. Tyler, I think you're being a bit sensitive. Sarah's just making conversation. She's insulting my family and my background. No one's insulting anyone, Victoria said coolly. You're making this awkward for everyone. I looked at Jessica, silently pleading with her to say something, anything, to defend me or at least acknowledge what was happening. But she just sat there, frozen. Maybe you should just relax, Brandon suggested. Sarah didn't mean anything by it. You're being kind of dramatic. I'm being dramatic? I felt anger rising in my chest, hot and sharp. Yes, Richard said firmly. You're making my family look bad by overreacting to simple conversation. Sarah is a guest in our home, and you're making her uncomfortable. I stared at my father-in-law, the man who'd spent 8 years treating me like hired help, the man who never asked about my business, never acknowledged my success, never treated me like I was worth his time. And now he was telling me I was making his family look bad. I apologize, I said finally. I didn't mean to make anyone uncomfortable. Sarah's smile widened. No worries, I totally understand. Sometimes people get defensive about their backgrounds. It's natural. The conversation moved on. Sarah started talking about her work at Ashton and Pierce, about the big clients they worked with, about the important campaigns she was involved in. Brandon hung on every word. Victoria asked interested questions. Richard nodded approvingly, and something in me shifted. I pulled out my phone under the table and started searching. Ashton and Pierce Marketing. Found their website, pulled up their client list, checked their recent press releases. Then I searched Sarah's name, found her LinkedIn profile, cross-referenced it with the company directory. Sarah, I said, interrupting her story about some campaign she'd worked on. How long have you been with Ashton and Pierce? About 8 months, she said proudly. I started as a senior marketing associate, but I'm already being considered for an account manager position. That's impressive, I said. And you said you work with their major clients? I do. I mean, I'm part of the team that handles them. It's very collaborative work. Which clients specifically? She hesitated for just a moment. Well, I can't reveal client names because of confidentiality agreements, but trust me, they're major brands. I nodded slowly. Right. Confidentiality. That makes sense. Why do you ask? Brandon said, suddenly defensive. Just curious about Sarah's work, since she was so interested in mine earlier. Sarah's smile had frozen slightly. It's fine, Brandon. Tyler's just making conversation. You know, I continued, setting my phone on the table. It's funny you mention Ashton and Pierce. I actually have some connection to that firm. The temperature in the room dropped noticeably. Really? Sarah's voice was careful now. Yeah. See, about 6 months ago, my company was looking to rebrand. We needed a marketing firm that understood B2B logistics consulting. We put out requests for proposals to several agencies in the area. I picked up my phone and pulled up my email. Ashton and Pierce was one of them. We ended up going with a different firm, but I still have all the correspondence. Richard was watching me now with narrowed eyes. Victoria had stopped eating. The thing is, I said, scrolling through my emails, during that process, I got to know quite a bit about Ashton and Pierce, their structure, their clients, their team members. Sarah had gone very pale. I'm looking at their client list right now, I continued. And you know what's interesting? The major brands you mentioned? They're mostly local businesses. A few regional restaurant chains, some small retail operations, a dental practice. Nothing wrong with that, of course. Somebody has to work with smaller clients. I never said they were Fortune 500 companies, Sarah said quickly. No, but you implied it. You said major brands. You made it sound very impressive. I looked at Brandon. And that account manager position she mentioned? That's not exactly accurate either. See, I have a friend who works at Ashton and Pierce, Jake Palmer. He's a creative director there. I pulled up my text thread with Jake and showed it to the table. I texted him just now while Sarah was talking, asked him if they have anyone named Sarah Kingsley working there. The silence was absolute. He says they do have a Sarah Kingsley, but she's not a senior marketing associate. She's a junior coordinator. Entry-level position. She answers phones, schedules meetings, and occasionally helps prepare presentation materials. Sarah's face had gone from pale to bright red. There's no account manager position being considered, I continued. There's no team handling major clients. She's the person who makes copies and orders lunch for meetings. Tyler, Jessica started. Hold on, I'm not done. I looked directly at Sarah. You spent the last 20 minutes mocking my background, my family, and my business. You called my company a little business. You implied I was barely better than a middle manager. You talked about me like I was some kind of charity case who got lucky. I pulled up my company's website on my phone and turned it toward the table. This is Morrison Logistics Consulting. We had $8.3 million in revenue last year. We employ 47 people. Our clients include 3 Fortune 500 companies and 7 major regional distributors. Last month, we closed a deal with a national retail chain that will generate $2.1 million in fees over the next 3 years. I looked at Richard. That's more than your best dealership makes in a year, Richard. His face went dark red. And Sarah, I continued, While you were sitting there making fun of my father for being a truck driver and my mother for working at a grocery store, you failed to mention that you're barely making $42,000 a year answering phones. That's less than my newest junior analyst makes." The silence stretched so long I could hear the antique clock ticking in the hallway. "You don't know anything about me," Sarah finally said, her voice shaking. "I know you're a liar," I replied calmly. "I know you've been sitting here for the past hour pretending to be something you're not, while mocking someone who actually built something real. And I know everyone at this table was perfectly happy to let you do it because it made them feel superior to the kid from Hartford." Brandon stood up. "You can't talk to her like that." "Sit down, Brandon. I'm talking to your father now." I turned to Richard. "You told me I was making your family look bad. You told me to stop overreacting. You sat there and let a stranger insult me, insult my parents, insult everything I've built, and you did nothing. Worse than nothing. You joined in." "Tyler, I think you should leave," Victoria said coldly. "I agree. But first, let me make something very clear." I stood up and looked around the table. "For 8 years, I've taken your condescension. I've taken your backhanded compliments. I've taken your jokes about my car, my clothes, my background. I've smiled through every family dinner where you've made me feel like I should be grateful you let me sit at your table." I looked at Jessica. "And you've never defended me. Not once. You've sat there every time and let them treat me like I'm beneath them. Like I'm lucky to be with you instead of the other way around." "Tyler, please," Jessica whispered. "I'm done," I said simply. "I'm done pretending this is normal. I'm done accepting disrespect from people who have accomplished less than I have, but act like they're royalty. And I'm especially done listening to some entry-level phone answerer mock my family while you all smile and nod." Sarah was crying now. Victoria was standing up, looking furious. Richard's face was purple with rage. Brandon looked like he wanted to fight me, but I didn't care anymore. "Jessica," I said, "you have a choice to make. You can stay here with your family and let them keep treating me like garbage, or you can come with me right now and we can build something better than this." Everyone was looking at her. Jessica was crying, mascara running down her cheeks. "Tyler, you can't just—" she started. "Yes or no, Jessica, right now." The moment stretched. I watched my wife, the woman I'd loved for 8 years, the woman I'd built a life with, struggle with the simplest question in the world. Stand with your husband, or stand with the people who'd spent 8 years making him feel worthless. "Tyler, my family," she began. "That's my answer then," I said. I walked out of that dining room, out of that house, and I didn't look back. Not when Victoria shouted after me. Not when I heard Jessica crying. Not when Brandon came to the door yelling about how I'd ruined everything. I got in my car, the nice BMW I'd bought with money I'd earned myself, and I drove home to our apartment. The apartment I'd paid for, with furniture I'd bought, in a building I'd chosen. That night, I got a text from Jake Palmer at Ashton and Pierce. "Dude, what happened? Sarah Kingsley just got fired. Her supervisor found out she's been lying about her position to everyone, including her boyfriend and his family. Apparently, your text exposed the whole thing." I didn't reply. I just sat there in my living room drinking the expensive scotch the Pattersons had given me for Christmas 2 years ago, and I thought about the moment at that dinner table when everyone's smiles had faded. The moment they realized the kid from Hartford wasn't someone they could look down on anymore. Jessica came home around midnight. Her eyes were red from crying. She sat down across from me without saying anything for a long time. "You humiliated Sarah," she finally said. "Sarah humiliated herself. She lost her job because of you. She lost her job because she lied about her position and got caught. That's not on me." Jessica shook her head. "My family thinks you're a monster. Your family thinks I'm beneath them. They always have. The only difference is now I've stopped pretending I don't notice." "Tyler, they're my parents, my brother. I can't just cut them off." "I'm not asking you to cut them off. I'm asking you to stand up for me when they treat me like garbage. I'm asking you to be on my side for once in 8 years. She was quiet for a long time. "I don't know if I can do that." And that's when I knew my marriage was over. We separated 3 weeks later. Jessica moved back in with her parents temporarily. The divorce papers came 2 months after that. She wanted the apartment, half my business equity, and spousal support. I gave her the apartment. I was tired of living in a space she'd chosen anyway. But I fought her on the business equity, and I won. She'd never been involved in the company, never contributed to its growth, never even acted interested in what I did. The judge agreed. Richard tried to intimidate me during the divorce proceedings, threatened to make things difficult with his connections, his lawyers, his money. But the thing about actually having money versus just acting like you do is that when push comes to shove, resources matter more than reputation. My lawyers were better than his lawyers. My documentation was better than his bluster, and when everything was settled, Jessica got far less than she'd hoped for. Sarah Kingsley and Brandon broke up within 2 weeks of that dinner. Apparently, once everyone knew, she'd been lying about her job. Brandon decided she wasn't impressive enough for him anymore. She moved back in with her parents and took a job at a different marketing firm. This time, she was honest about being entry-level. I heard through mutual friends that she actually apologized to Jessica for what happened. Not to me, never to me, but at least she acknowledged she'd been out of line. The Pattersons didn't speak to me after the divorce was finalized. That was fine. I didn't have anything to say to them either. But here's what happened that made everything worth it. About 6 months after the divorce, I was having dinner at a restaurant downtown with a potential client. Nice place, white tablecloths, extensive wine list, the kind of restaurant the Pattersons would have felt at home in. I was halfway through explaining my company's services when I noticed Richard and Victoria Patterson being seated 3 tables away. They saw me at the same moment I saw them. For just a second, Richard looked like he was going to come over and make a scene, but then he saw who I was sitting with. Recognized him. James Morrison, CEO of Morrison Distribution Corp., one of the largest logistics companies in the Northeast. Same last name as me. Not a coincidence. He was my uncle on my father's side. The successful side of the family the Pattersons had never bothered to ask about. My dad drove trucks. His brother owned the trucking company, and several others, and had just agreed to invest in my consulting firm to help us expand regionally. I watched Richard's face as he realized this. Watched him understand that the kid from Hartford he'd looked down on for 8 years wasn't just successful on his own merits. He had family backing. Real family. The kind who showed up when you needed them. Uncle James noticed Richard staring and leaned in. "You know them?" "That's my ex-father-in-law," I said quietly. James glanced over, then smiled. "The one who thought he was better than us? That's the one. Want me to go say hello? I've been looking for a reason to buy up some car dealerships, his specifically." I thought about it. Thought about the satisfaction of watching Richard's face as my uncle made him an offer he couldn't refuse, then slowly dismantled everything he'd built. But then I thought about that dinner table, about Sarah's tears, about Jessica's choice, about the moment I'd walked out of that house and felt lighter than I had in years. "No," I said. "Let's just finish our dinner. He's not worth the time." We did, and when I walked past Richard's table on my way out, I stopped and looked down at him. "Hello, Richard. Victoria. Enjoying your meal?" Richard's jaw was clenched so tight I thought he might crack a tooth. Victoria wouldn't meet my eyes. "Food's excellent here," I continued conversationally. "Uncle James and I come here whenever we meet to discuss business. He's thinking about expanding into Connecticut. Maybe I'll mention your dealerships to him. Could be an interesting acquisition opportunity." I smiled, not meanly, just professionally. "Enjoy your evening," I said, and walked out. That was 3 years ago. Since then, Morrison Logistics Consulting has tripled in size. We opened offices in Boston and Providence. We landed contracts with 2 Fortune 100 companies. Last year, our revenue hit $26 million. I bought a house in Madison, right on the water. Nice place. Better than the Pattersons' Westport Colonial. I didn't buy it to show off. I bought it because I earned it and I wanted it. I heard through mutual friends that Jessica remarried. Some guy who works in finance. I hope she's happy. I really do. But I also hope she learned something from what happened. I hope she learned that standing by and watching someone you love get disrespected isn't loyalty to your family. It's betrayal of your marriage. I hope she learned that background doesn't determine worth. That where someone came from matters less than where they're going. And I hope she learned that sometimes the person everyone thinks is lucky to be at the table is actually the most valuable person there. As for Sarah Kingsley, I ran into her about a year ago at a networking event. She was working for a small startup, doing actual marketing work this time. She'd grown up a bit, lost some of that polished arrogance she'd had. She saw me across the room, and I could tell she was debating whether to approach or hide. After a few minutes, she came over. "Tyler," she said, "I owe you an apology." "You do?" "I was awful to you that night. I was trying to impress Brandon and his family, and I went way too far. I'm sorry." I studied her for a moment. She seemed genuine. People change sometimes. "Apology accepted," I said. "But Sarah, you didn't just go too far. You revealed something about yourself. You were willing to tear someone else down to build yourself up. That's not just bad behavior. That's bad character." She nodded slowly. "You're right. I've been working on that. Therapy, self-reflection, all that stuff. I'm trying to be better." "Good luck with that," I said, and I meant it. But I also walked away, because some people deserve second chances, but that doesn't mean you have to be the one to give them. Looking back on that dinner now, I realize it was the best thing that could have happened to me. It forced me to finally acknowledge what I'd been ignoring for 8 years. That I'd married into a family that would never respect me. That I'd chosen a wife who wouldn't stand up for me when it mattered. And it freed me to build the life I actually wanted instead of the life I thought I was supposed to want. My parents came to visit last month. Mom loved the new house. Dad stood on the deck overlooking the water and shook his head in wonder. "Never thought a kid from our neighborhood would end up here," he said. "You raised me right, Dad. Taught me that honest work and treating people with respect matters more than where you come from." He smiled. "Your mother and I are proud of you, Tyler. Not because of the money or the house, but because you didn't let anyone make you feel less than you are." That's the real lesson from that dinner. Not that I had money or success or connections, but that I finally refused to accept being treated as less than I was worth. The Pattersons taught me something valuable, even if they didn't mean to. They taught me that respect has to be demanded sometimes. That being nice and accommodating and hoping people will eventually see your worth doesn't work when they've already decided you're beneath them. Sometimes you have to pull out your phone and show them exactly who you are, and then you have to walk away from anyone who still doesn't get it. That Sunday dinner cost me a marriage and a relationship with my in-laws, but it gave me something more valuable. It gave me back my self-respect, and I wouldn't trade that for anything. If this story resonated with you, I hope you'll share it. Comment below about times you've had to stand up for yourself against people who underestimated you. And remember, your worth isn't determined by what other people think of you. It's determined by what you know about yourself. Thanks for listening to my story. Take care of yourselves out there, and never let anyone make you feel small for where you came from. Your background is part of your strength, not something to be ashamed of.